Welcome to SolderSmoke, a podcast by radio amateurs with a focus on homebrew electronics. From our workshops in Juneau, Alaska and London, England, we get together on the Echolink system and swap ideas about radio construction projects. Our website is www.soldersmoke.com. Please send feedback to soldersmoke@yahoo.com. So, as we briefly step away from our soldering irons and oscilloscopes, please join us for another edition of SolderSmoke.
KL7R, near the Mendenhall Glacier in Juneau, Alaska. This is M0HBR in central London. Are you there, Mike?
Yeah, good morning, Bill. It's not raining in Juneau. A bit of a change, but I see we have a little different conditions today. I see we're operating in the QRP conference rather than direct connected, and I see there's a visitor here in the conference. Over.
Yeah, I'm hearing signals coming in from. We must have good skip on Echolink this morning, Mike, and I'm hearing signals coming in from Victor Uniform Land. I think I heard the call correct. Let's see if we can bring them in. VU2FAX. This is M0HBR. Are you there, Farhan?
Hi there, Bill and Mike. Kilo Lima 7 Radio, Mike 0HBR. This is Victor United 2 Fox Alpha X-Ray. Very good morning to you guys. What a pleasure meeting you both on the QRP conference on Echolink. Am I disturbing anything? Is this a private chat, or are you guys recording something today? Bye-bye.
Well, no. Actually, we were hoping you'd show up today. We've been trying to get you for a couple of weeks now, and it's really great to hear your voice again, and great that you could take the time and swing by and visit a bit. We've been anxious to ask you lots of questions about what you're doing with your projects in India, and questions about the BitX20, and questions about your working environment, and your, I don't know if you've heard of a guy called MacGyver, but to me you're India's MacGyver there, Farhan. Over to you there, Bill. M0HBR. We'll do a little roundtable, I guess. KL7R.
Yes, KL7R, and with VU2FAX. This is M0HBR. Yeah, Farhan, we're delighted to have you with us. We were just kidding there about the skip conditions on Echolink, but we were trying to bring a little radio realism into it. But you are the very first guest on SolderSmoke, and we couldn't be more pleased to have you with us. We've been talking about the BitX20 on and off probably for the last 6 months or a year, and looking at your websites and monitoring the Yahoo group. And so we're really delighted to have one of the leaders in the homebrew community with us here on SolderSmoke. And maybe we could just start off. I'd like to throw out a question. If you could just tell us a little bit about homebrewing in India. I was always really interested in the BitX20 because when I read about it back in, I think, 2003, you emphasized the design objective of having a design that would have parts that were readily available to homebrewers in India. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about that, what it's like to be a homebrewer in India, and how the BitX20 is designed for the needs of folks who are melting solder there in your country, Farhan. Over to you, Farhan. VU2FAX and the group. This is M0HBR.
M0HBR, Kilo Lima 7 Radio, VU2FX. Actually, I'm really delighted to be here. I'm still kidding about it. I've been actually, avid tuner, listener of the podcast for a while, and I find it really interesting. I usually play it while I'm doing some other work, and it's actually very interesting. I actually, homebrewing in India is not an option actually for a lot of us. Although it is not really also true that we have to homebrew in any case. I don't know whether you guys know this, but Rajiv Gandhi, who was our Prime Minister, got assassinated maybe about 10 years ago, no, 12 years ago maybe. So he was actually fairly avid ham himself, and he saw to it that there were government procedures which cut down on the import duties, etc., for ham radio sets, and you could actually import them virtually without duty. But even then, given the Indian average salaries, it's actually very difficult to buy a foreign rig. So there were quite a few of people who would homebrew. Now this was the difference. The people who were homebrewing and who continue homebrewing in India are not necessarily people who are doing it for the technical thrill, but also because that's the only way they can actually do things and get on the air. So the sort of homebrewing efforts that you see in India are actually fairly different from what you see abroad. Specifically, they'd actually take a shortwave broadcast radio, add a BFO to it, so that is your receiving setup. It's very difficult to actually tune in stations because the entire band is about maybe quarter turn of the dial, and you need to tune that in, and then you put a MOPA sort of a transmitter, which is master oscillator and power amplifier. This is of recent vintage, I'm saying, but earlier the standard setup in any shack would be actually a World War II radio, and I'm talking about this maybe until the mid-90s. So you either had an HRO or a BC348, and you had a valve lineup ending on an 807 or 6146B with a multiplier chain, which would allow you to do 7 or 14 megahertz work. But there have been some really good homebrewers. Mention a couple of them right way. Victor United 2 Nancy Radio, Raju and Rao, Victor United 2 Radio Mike, did a lot of work. There are some people who didn't do as much work, but little work, but fairly substantial work, like Victor United 2 Oscar Zulu. I'll discuss more of them in my next over, so I think turn it over to Kilo Lima 7 Radio. This is Victor United 2 Fox Alpha X-ray.
All right, Farhan. Wow, that's really interesting. You don't, that necessity is the mother of invention, I guess, is the phrase. If you have to, you can be fairly creative. It sounds that's the case with VU hams. I've seen a number of designs, and my impression of VU students is that they're brilliant in general. I don't know if it's the schools over there or if it's just the people, but the people seem brilliant. They're just wonderfully nice and smart guys. So that's pretty cool stuff that you're talking about, using old World War II gear or modifying receivers to spread the band spread and maybe add a BFO to pretty cool stuff. I was looking at your BitX20 and I was trying to think of how you could build a radio using nothing but Radio Shack parts, and you could almost do it with an IRF510 and an LM386 and some diodes and capacitors and what all. But the hard part is the ferrite transformers. Did you ever try transformers without ferrite? Did you try air core transformers? Farhan, I'll turn it back to you, and then maybe you can turn it over to Bill there. VU2FAX KL7R.
KL7R M0HBR. This is VU2FAX. I have actually played around with air cores. My problem is laziness, more than anything else. There are just too many terms to put into an air core former. That's one problem that I have. The bigger problem really is you still require a former which is temperature insensitive, and that's actually a little hard to come by. I have tried everything from felt marker bodies to test tubes. Remarkably, actually, test tubes are one of the best formers because they are heat resistant and they don't really expand too much, although they're made of glass. So that's one. Other is a shielding property. I don't see that shielding is very easy to come by with air cores. They're very sensitive to things moving around them. But if you look at the VTX design, I have used air core toroids actually, which is fairly interesting to do. The idea is not originally mine. I must put a disclaimer here. Years ago, I don't remember when, but in Hints and Kinks, about maybe 15-20 years ago, I saw a very small article there which actually showed Teflon toroids meant for VHF, which were turned out of a Teflon stock. And I thought that would be a cool thing to do, and probably if I could do the same thing with nylon washers which are available to be put into water taps in India, and they're really cheap, so I could get away with it, which is what I did finally. And actually coils remain a challenge in India, because one of the things which is simply not available here are the toroids. They are actually manufactured by some companies here, but they are not available off the shelf, and people hunt them around. So one of the key things actually in BTX, as well as the dual band transceiver before BTX, was that I did a lot of experimentation with various types of coils and finally found out what works. And actually what I had is a test oscillator and a frequency counter coupled to it, so I could actually wind different coils and see where the inductance goes, what's the Q, etc., and put them into my designs later on. So I'll put it back to Bill. This is Victor United 2 Fox Alpha X-ray in the group.
Okay, Farhan. Well, great. Very interesting. Yeah, the necessity as a mother of invention, as Mike said, and I'm often envious that when I see the kind of experimentation and home brewing being done in India, and for me, it doesn't really matter whether it's because people, have to do it or want to do it. The fact that is that the people are building their own gear, and that's just, of course, from the home brewer's perspective, that's the important thing. Yeah, on the cores and the toroids, I have a very old printout here. It's dated the 2nd of November 2003, which is an indication of how long I've been an admirer of the BIT X20. But I see that at this point you were using TV binocular cores, and I thought that was one of the really neat things about your design, and the taking advantage of discarded televisions. And so, I've got the picture here. You've got the 4 diodes and the 2 binocular cores wound into obviously a balanced mixer configuration here. But I thought that was kind of neat. I wonder if you're still using those. Also, I wanted to ask you how many BIT X20s are there out there, Farhan, in the world? I mean, you guys have a group, and I know there's a lot of internet discussion about this, but I wonder if you have a sense of how many are being built in India and how many are being built around the world, how many are already on the air. How big is the BIT X20 community? I'll turn it over to you, VU2FAX, and the group M0HBR.
M0HBR and the group, this is VU2FAX. Bill, I'm not really sure, how many people are building it, but I do see that there is a lot of interest. I'm not any longer the person who drives the BTX community, really. It's Arv who manages the group, and Hans Sommer himself. His contribution has actually been invaluable. Less in technical terms, but more in putting the whole entire community together. He just grabbed onto the design and said, this is what we need to do, and we need to get a Yahoo group done. In fact, he's the one who created the Yahoo group, and I've been a great admirer of his site and the work he does. But as you said, that it doesn't really matter whether it's by compulsion that you have to homebrew or not. And actually, Hans is a case in point. I was really surprised, once in one of his emails he mentioned that he was between jobs and he wouldn't find much time to do homebrewing in the meantime. And I asked him, what does he do? And he told me that actually he's an investment banker of sorts. He manages a fairly large venture capital fund. And you wouldn't imagine that a guy, who has millions of dollars literally, sitting around would think of, making toroids out of nylon washers. Anyway, so I'm not really sure, just coming back to the topic, that how many BTXs are really in place. I know that Rahul Srivastav, that is VU3WJM, has been turning out a lot of printed circuit boards. I know someone down the southern tip of India near Kerala has been actually assembling and selling BTX20s and BTX40s. I don't know about far circuits. They're saying that they have some PCBs available. And I actually see that BTX article has been now translated into too many languages. In fact, I don't even know what languages they are. But when I see the hits come on Google, I'm really surprised at it. But, more than the design, it's just the way it's gone out. I think more important than the circuit diagram is the little copy left notice on the circuit and the article, which says, you don't have to ask me anything about reproducing it, just go ahead and do it, which is really how it used to work earlier in the days of ham radio. If you look at the articles in 70s written by Wes and Doe, you will see that, they are saying that we got the circuit from Heathkit's, this is a neat trick that we saw in, column receiver, and here it is, etc., which is all gone now, mostly because people are far more sensitive to their copyrights and to their intellectual property. So I think that's the key thing here, that, I no longer claim to be the author of the transceiver, so to speak. I'll put it back to Mike there. This is Victor United 2 Fox Alpha X-ray in the group.
Okay, Farhan. I guess the main thing that stuck out to me when I looked at it was the fact that you were using toroidal air core inductors. But the other main thing that stuck out to me was the fact that you're using bidirectional amplifiers. And I didn't, until I looked at your circuit, really pay that much attention to bidirectional amplifiers. I thought they were a single transistor that could be used either direction, but yours has two transistors that can be switched, based on transmit and receive. And I wondered why you chose that sort of layout, and why basically you duplicated all the amplifiers in transmit and receive. Could you have done the same thing with switching wires around, and why you chose it to do it that way? Was that cleaner and simpler, or was it just interesting to try it that way? Back to you there, Farhan. VU2 of FAX, KL7R.
KL7R, M0HBR, this is VU2 FAX. Well, Mike, I was actually trying to simplify things for myself. I've seen quite a few, bidirectional designs. If you remember, there is actually one in solid-state design as well. And actually, what got this started was a design in the transmitters and receivers section of the experimental methods. The new book from ARRL. That's actually, that had a PNP and an NPN transistor wrapped around each other, and depending on, which one you turn on, it would work. But it was a little too complex for me. It actually did require just a 6-volt supply, because one transistor would be entirely reverse biased, as opposed to the other one, and there was a problem with the junction breakdown, reverse junction breakdown, in case the voltages went above 6 volts, and I didn't, think that was a very neat thing to do. So, I actually took some pains at explaining how it works in my article of BITX, but I don't think that too many people actually go through the heavy stuff. But simply speaking, it's actually two amplifiers strapped back to back, all right, and you just turn one of them on. So it's actually very simple at that level. The only thing that you have to bother about is that that part of the amplifier which is switched off still contributes passive components to the active part. So actually, if you see the BTX 20 design, there is a 2.2K resistor, which is a feedback resistor, between the collector and the base of every amplifier there. But actually, if you look at it closely, the other 2.2K, which is strapped onto the other transistor of the pair, is also in the circuit. So actually, the RF feedback is of 1.1K resistor, because the 2.2Ks parallel up. So that was actually the key thing to understanding how it works, because the passive components still remain there, right? But what I did like about the design was that there's a symmetry to it, right? There's 50 ohms at one side, then it becomes 200 ohms at the other side, which becomes 50 on again, and then from 50 to 200 ohms again. So it's very symmetrical, and I thought that it was a very neat thing to do more than anything else, which is why I built it this way. If you see my earlier SSD transceiver, where there's a lot of switching and a lot of relays, and I had developed an aversion to using so many relays to do switching, so I thought that there must be an easier way to switch. And I looked at the Atlas 210 design, and I think that it's really a great design. So I thought that that was one way to go, using 4 FETs, but I just simply couldn't afford to put 4 FETs into that design. I'll hand it back to you, Bill there. This is VU2FX in the group.
Okay, all right, Farhan. Well, very interesting. Yeah, and I've been a real admirer of the bidirectional circuitry. I'm a far less sophisticated homebrewer here, and usually what I do when I do some of the double sideband rigs, there's very often the opportunity to use one of the stages both in receive and transmit, but in my very unsophisticated way, I just go ahead and build another stage. So I have far more components in there than I really need. But at my level, it's probably just easier to have an additional stage in there. Usually, the only common stage in the DSB rigs that I've been working on is the oscillator. Listen, you mentioned a couple of things that I wanted to comment on. First, Hans Summers. I've been an admirer of his work for many years, and I'm ashamed to say that Hans and I have never gotten together. Even though we live probably just maybe 10 or 15 miles apart. He's out in Surrey. I'm here in central London, and your comments really reminded me that we have to get together, and at the very least, we need to get Hans on here as a guest on SolderSmoke one of these days. I didn't realize that he was working in finance. Because of the really high technical quality of his site and his work, I always assumed that he was an engineer. But it just goes to show you that people from all fields, as you say, can be involved in the homebrew game. I wanted to ask you about experimental methods, Farhan, because I know in the pictures on your site, I saw that you have the BitX20 sitting I'm sure very symbolically on top of experimental methods, and I'm sure you're trying to send a message there and give due credit to the wonderful book. You and I spoke briefly on Skype about the importance of that book in your home brewing, and you specifically talked about the method that Wes was presenting in that book. I wonder if you could just comment a little bit about the importance of experimental methods. Mike and I have been having some email exchanges with Wes about that book and about the earlier solid state design, and it's been really interesting for us, and I'd just be interested in hearing your perspective on the importance of these and perhaps other books for home brewers. I'll turn it back to you, Farhan. VU2FAX and the group M0HBR.
M0HBR, KL7R, VU2FAX. I can't, overstate the importance of, these books in shaping, the homebrewing community as such. More than anything else, they set a standard for us to, shoot for. If you see the ham literature is usually littered with, a single transistor, CW transmitters, and, badly designed direct conversion receivers. This is actually a very different approach, and I was really surprised, especially with the EMRFD, wherein I don't know if you've remembered this, that the first thing that it mentioned about was personal science in the foreword. That this is one of the few instances of personal science where people sitting in the basement are as empowered to contribute to radio design as are the engineers in the multi-million-dollar labs. And it gives you a lot of building blocks to play around with, but it also emphasizes that experimental method is a very valid approach to designing things, as opposed to theoretical simulation and going through with the entire process of validating it on paper first before you do something else. So the key thing really is to experiment and measure, which is actually one thing. If there's one thing I'll tell any new home brewer, it is that you need to be able to measure what you're doing, however crudely. My workbench actually is not very elaborate, but I can actually get by with a lot of things. I have one of my TV toroids wound up like an RF bridge, so it helps me do the impedance measurements. I have a test oscillator in which I can put different types of coil capacitors and quartz crystals all on the same, with which I can measure the frequency, and as a result I can measure the stability of a coil or the motional parameters of a crystal. I was earlier using a GDO, which I've stopped using now, since I've switched to using a frequency counter with a test oscillator as my main measurement thing. I actually very rarely use a multimeter. I have a Homebrew RF voltmeter with me. Actually, the only bought out item in my entire shack is an oscilloscope. It's a Tektronix oscilloscope 465. It's something that I've been eyeing for years. An object of desire of sorts for me. But the inspiration really came from an old picture of W7ZY's shack, wherein he very simply mentioned that everything you see here is homebrew, and I tried doing the same thing with my shack too. So it's actually very inspirational, both these books, and more than being inspirational, I think that they are very extremely valuable.
Okay, well that's great, Farhan. And just going to ask you what sort of test equipment you have there, and I was wondering what you use to measure signal levels in oscillator trains and what all. So it's really cool what you've done there. You mentioned a couple things when you were talking about the bidirectional amps, and one of them was the 50 ohms and 200 ohm design choices there. So everything was either 50 ohm or 200 ohm. That's just so smart and so modular. Somebody out there on the Yahoo group for the BitX20 mentioned that the BitX was a nice design platform, in that all the modules were known impedance in and out, and so you could swap in a new module and have it work for known input and output impedance. So I'll have to look at the Atlas 210 design. I had an Atlas 210 long time ago. I really just love that radio. So based on your recommendation, I'll go see if I can find a schematic on that and see what I can find out there. I have a bunch of half-written notes here, and I guess I guess I was wondering if you had a device to measure signal level at LO power level. So you have some sort of a power meter, or if you use your scope for a power meter. And I was wondering if you'd experimented with direct conversion receivers and single image direct conversion receivers. Back to you there, Farhan. VU2 FAX KL7R.
KL7R, M0HPR, VU2FAX. I don't have actually a power meter of sorts, but the Tektronix does a great job. It's something I picked up on the eBay for about $200, and that's what I use. I actually have, I forgot to mention this, I have an attenuator pad, not a pad I should say, but something in which I can switch attenuators on off at 3 dB, 10 dB and 20 dB, which provide me with a consistent load, and which I can then measure off on my oscilloscope these days. Earlier I used to do it on the RF voltmeter of mine, but I found that the RF voltmeter was not too good. For example, I wouldn't know if I was having a trace of a noise or something on my signal, so I decided to actually make that purchase. I have, coming back to direct conversion receivers, actually last year I completed a direct conversion receiver, but it's a usual design. More than the design, I actually wrote an article too, which I have not posted anywhere. More than it being a clinical article about, just doing the direct conversion receiver, which is a fairly simple one there. There's nothing exciting there. It was actually designed along with my cousin, and she was, finishing off a project. She needed a project for her electrical engineering class, and we did this together, and I watched her do it. It was very interesting, it was finished over about 4 or 5 evenings, but you try various things and take it out. So it's more like a journal in which, you go through the heartaches of stuff not working and, the joys of getting things to work. Maybe one of these days I'll, clean it up and put it on the website, but it's, I've done a lot of direct conversion receivers. In fact, not as many superheads as direct conversion receivers. I find they're very nice. Most probably in an evening you can get one running if you have yourself entirely organized, which I never am. I'm actually thinking of doing something with, single signal direct conversion radios, but I just don't know where to start. The complexity of the entire thing is maybe fairly overwhelming for me, but one of these days I will do it. I find superheads more approachable because, you keep doing it, so you think that it's easier. But I think it's time to try for a single signal direct conversion transceiver more than a receiver. I'm actually, I was, trying to go through some of Bill's designs there with the double sideband transceivers, and I was wondering whether I could adapt one of them to transmit SSB while receiving DSB. I think it's important to be practical here. There's no need for single side reception as much as cluttering the bands. I mean, personally, that's a choice I would make. So I'll actually put it back to Mike, and let's see what he has to say. Mike, take it up. This is VU2FX and the group.
All right, Farhan. I've done some direct conversion receiver and double sideband transmitter, and the major problem with that is when you're tuning across, and it's difficult to know which side to tune for CW to go back to. So the single image receive, I think, would be really valuable. And then on the transmit side, if you're going to try to do something like PSK or something like that, it's really not fair to people on the wrong sideband that you'll never hear to be transmitting 2 PSK signals. So it'd be nice to have some sort of single sideband. I've been throwing around the idea maybe making a Quadrature audio and see if I can, duplicate some of the stuff that KK7B did. I made a binaural receiver, and I was thinking I could modify the binaural receiver with the audio Quadrature and get single, upper sideband or lower sideband receive. So that might be fun to do if I get around to that. Let's see. Over to you there, Bill. M0HBR, KL7R.
KL7R with VU2FAX. This is M0HBR. Wow, just so much interesting stuff. I always have a page here where I jot down notes, and between the two of you, the page has filled up. Just a few comments. Let me start by telling Farhan that we often have an additional participant here in SolderSmoke, and that's my 8-year-old son Billy, and he's arrived, and he's sitting with me, and he's very interested to see the now truly global connection that we have, not just Alaska and London, but now India on the SolderSmoke frequency. So that's pretty cool this morning. You mentioned several things you said, Farhan, really resonated with me. One, you talked about the personal science and empowerment that is embodied in the whole experimental methods solid-state design approach, and that's really quite something. One thing I really like about both solid-state design and experimental methods is the circuitry when they show in the pictures. It's very much the Manhattan ugly style of construction. But anyway, I really like the ugly approach that is in the experimental methods there. Let's see. You mentioned, Farhan, the picture of W7ZOI's shack, and that picture really influenced me too. I think I remember the specific picture. It has a can of a tobacco can, like for pipe tobacco, and then the vast array of homebrew equipment and homebrew test gear there. So that was really, really neat. And let's see, what else? Well, let me. Oh yeah, Mike, you mentioned the difficulty of tuning with direct conversion receiver. I'm always reminded of the HW8 trick that you used to have to do. They always told you to tune up on the upper side of 0 beat, and then you knew that you were on the on the right frequency. These are the challenges of double sideband work. I think I got my audio problem straightened out. I think I might have been I might not have been speaking into the mic. Let me turn it over. Let's see. I think it goes to Farhan now. VU2FAX in the group M0HBR.
M0HBR in the group. This is VU2FAX. Bill. One of the things which I have always wondered about, especially PSK31, is that PSK31 is a double sideband signal. If you look at the waveform, and there is no reason why you can't do a simple DSB transceiver which would do PSK31. I think it's an overkill to actually generate a DSB signal in audio, then feed it through an SSB transceiver to make it work. So if you could just simplify the software by not modulating a 1 kilohertz or whatever 700 hertz signal with a DSB PSK31 baud signal, and then push it through an SSB transceiver. You could just take the baseband DSB, which is changing at 31 bauds, and put it directly into a diode ring mixer, and that would actually generate a PSK31 signal. Thinking about doing something like that. I'm fortunate to be able to do software as well as radio. My professional life is actually software, and most of it is digital signal processing. That's actually one of the reasons why I do not put any digital work in my radios, because it's basically an escape from the professional work which I do, which is basically writing internet telephony software. But I think I need to look at one of Bill's DSB transceivers and see if I can get PSK31 actually going on that. That's a mode which has interested me a lot. And of recent vintages, my interest in the Hell mode. I don't know if you people have been following that. I think it's a very neat mode, which is fuzzy, in the sense that your eye can do a lot of the DSP work, which does not have to be done by the computer. And it's a picture mode, which is of 1932. I think that's when it was invented. I think it's a neat mode, and maybe people who are listening in would want to look it up in on Google or wherever, and there's a lot of software available for that too. So I'll put it back to you, Bill. This is VU2FAX and the group.
Okay, all right, real good. I think my audio problem was actually caused by the fact that Billy was just waking up and he was sitting on my lap here, and I think it caused me to point my microphone in the wrong direction. But he's off now. He's down having breakfast. Yeah, well, I know what you mean, Farhan, about having an escape from the workplace environment. I'm fortunate that my work has nothing to do with radio and electronics, so for me this is all a complete escape. But then I find myself getting jealous of you guys who do have technical things to work on when you go to the office. So I guess there are advantages in both ways. Yeah, well, the DSB, I'm delighted to hear that you're interested in the DSB thing. I just got into it because of simplicity, and what got me into it was an article in CQ magazine by Doug DeMaw many years ago about just a real simple double sideband transmitter, and I used his circuit and built one when I was out in the Azores and put it on 17 meters, and that was my first homebrew phone rig, and really had a great time with it. Conditions were good, and I used to speak to people all over the world with that thing. And I know Mike and I always talk about this, that it's a particularly good approach for newcomers, for people who want to get into phone without going through all the complexities of building an SSB transceiver, which is quite a project. You do have the issue of using twice as much of the frequency spectrum as required, but when you keep in mind the experimental roots of ham radio, I think that we should be given some tolerance in that area, and if a guy has enough initiative and works hard enough to build his own double sideband transceiver, especially at QRP levels, I think the ham radio fraternity should cut him some slack, as we say, and forgive him for his double wide signal. Well, this is great. We've got a real global connection here. This is the first time I think SolderSmoke has been truly around the world at the same time. Let me see. I'll turn it back over to and Farhan. Yeah, please. I hope you use any and all of the double sideband stuff that we put together. There's a lot better articles out there, I'm sure. But I wanted to mention also, you talked about your journal of building the direct conversion receiver with your cousin. Yeah, put that up on the web. Those are the kind of things that we really like to read. I think that there's a need for more of that kind of honest discussion of the trials and tribulations of real home brewing. That I think people find that very interesting and very encouraging, and I'm sure people would love to. You use the word heartache when you describe the process there, and those of us who've done it know exactly what you mean. Let me turn it over to our colleague up there in Juneau, Alaska, KL7R, and the group M0HBR.
Wow, you guys, we could keep going all night here, but maybe we'll save some of it for another time, I guess. Your comments about PSK, Farhan, I hacked an HW8 heat kit QRP radio so that it would do double sideband, and I did a PSK contact, a couple of PSK contacts through it, so it's doable. Your comments about about modulating the carrier not at audio, but right down there at near 0 hertz at 31 bit either side of 0. That's really smart. There are some guys that are doing that sort of thing with with QRSS. There's guys in Germany that are modulating, just like you say, baseband modulating hell type video images of their call signs on QRSF. So they're kind of thinking like you are, but I don't think anybody's mentioned doing PSK, basically baseband. I don't know anybody that's done that. That's pretty interesting. Let's see. And your comment about doing DSP for work, I've got to dump this thought out. The past 2 days, I have been thinking. I did a Google search for SSB and Hilbert. If you do a Google search for Hilbert and SSB, you get a bunch of stuff on Hilbert transforms, and it's apparently a way to do DSP to generate Quadrature audio. And there's IIR filters and FIR filters that you can do to create a Hilbert transform to generate Quadrature audio. And I was thinking if somebody could figure out how to stuff a PIC with an A to D converter, a microcircuits PIC with a Hilbert transformer, then you'd have all you needed to generate Quadrature audio and get single image receive and single sideband out of a direct conversion rig. So I'm sure it's over my head, but I know all the steps I'd have to do, but I dropped that thought on you there. Well, that's about all I had. Farhan, turn it over to you and see if you had any final comments or ideas there. Sure, a great pleasure to visit with you here. VU2FAX, KL7R.
KL7R, M0HBR, this is VU2FAX. It was really a pleasure, running into homebrewers like you guys this morning. A couple of, a lot of stuff that we hams would like to go on about, but one thing which I am coming around to agreeing to is that you never finish a homebrew project, or you never actually begin it on any particular day. You just continue, if you know what I mean. I mean, you have a project which just keeps brewing in your head for a while, then you try parts of it out, then you leave it out, and you keep coming back to it. In the meantime, something else comes up, then you sort of get distracted by some other project, you come back, but you always sort of keep continuing on all your projects. There are always things you'll find to do with rigs you've made, or change it or redo it, etc. So it's always a process. It's never an event, so to speak, to homebrew a thing, and that's actually what defines a homebrew radio from a bought-out transceiver, which is all packed in, and there is not much you can do. That actually is for me the real value of homebrewing. It's linearly just keeps flowing out, and various things you can keep trying and experimenting with. I'll actually check up on this on these group of Germans who are doing this project. But frankly, PIC will not be able to do it. You'll require a DSP processor with at least about 20 MIPS or 30 MIPS to be able to handle that sort of processing load, because it is really a huge processing load when you're doing a Hilbert transform for voice frequencies. I think I'm more inclined towards the polyphase networks. There's just about 20 resistors and 20 capacitors, which you can just solder together, and it will work. You don't have to really bother about it being extremely, precise or whatever. It will just work. It mixes all the signals within the network and then gives you the output. And it's bidirectional. That's another win. If it was not for the lossiness in the network, you could actually just put 2 diode ring mixers with a polyphase network, and you would actually have a bidirectional, entirely passive transceiver working. You take audio from one end and RF from the other end, and it would magically work. For me, personally, I think doing things the digital way with the computer it's an easy win. It's not much about really designing radios there. Second problem is that there are no quadrature detector chips available here, but that's another story. Finally, it was really a pleasure meeting both of you, and I will continue tuning into SolderSmoke podcasts like.
Yeah, right. Okay. Well, Farhan, it's been a pleasure for us, and well, you're hearing about your circuit ideas and your philosophy on home brewing. It's been really an inspiration. I agree with you completely. As I look around the shack, I see rigs that started out as 17-meter DSB rigs that have been converted to other bands and other modes. And anyway, it's been great. I think we've got to wrap it up. We could go on here for days and days, but we've got to keep the program short enough to fit into MP3 players and iPods. So let's just agree to do this again soon and continue the conversation here on SolderSmoke. I think we're going to take up your ideas and try to get Hans on the show and others. But this has been our first guest, and it's been a real great success, and I've really enjoyed it. I know Mike did too. So let's just wrap it up and say 7-3s. Thanks very much for joining us, Farhan. Really, thank you very much. And we'll say 7-3s all around. I'll turn it over to Mike and let him tie the ribbons here on this SolderSmoke 33. KL7R in the group, M0HBR.
All right, Bill and Farhan, I really appreciate you swinging by. It really nice. You have a warm voice, and your ideas are just great. So I hope to bump into you again soon. I'm sure we'll mail each other if we don't meet again here on Echolink. Farhan, do us a favor and tie the ribbons on it. Say 73 to the crew out there, and you can be the last voice when the music goes. Over to you there, VU2FAX, KL7R.
KL7R, M0HBR. This is VU2FAX. Very fine business there, Mike and Bill. It's a real pleasure, and I think SolderSmoke is just bringing ham radio back to a lot of people and to a lot of lives, especially the old ham radio. So I would say 73s to everybody who's tuned in today and to this edition of our podcast. And I look forward to hearing more visitors here and to hear what both of you have been up to and what the world of homebrewing is doing to build greater radios down the line. 73s everybody, and it's a pleasure being here. Bye-bye.